Imagine waking up to a phone call that promises to double your money in just 21 days. It sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? But what if I told you that some of the biggest banks, hedge funds, and even royal families fell for a scam far greater than anything you can imagine, one that lasted for decades and wiped out $65 billion? Yes, this is the story of the largest Ponzi scheme in stock market history. A financial deception so massive, it fooled Wall Street elites, Hollywood celebrities, and even the most respected financial regulators in the world. The mastermind behind it all? A man who wasn't just any trader, he was once the chairman of NASDAQ, a financial genius who rigged the system in plain sight. Today, we unravel the shocking truth behind this scam. How one man built an empire of lies, manipulated markets, and fooled the entire world for over 20 years. But the real question is, how did he get away with it for so long? And could something like this still be happening today? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear will shake your trust in the financial system forever. So, if Ponzi wasn't the first to run this type of scheme, what made his name forever linked to it? And how did his story unfold into one of the most infamous financial frauds in history? Imagine it's the early 1920s. Charles Ponzi, an ambitious Italian immigrant in Boston, claims to have discovered a foolproof investment. He tells eager investors that he can double their money in just 90 days. The secret: buying and selling international postal reply coupons at a massive profit. It sounds too good to be true, and it is. But how did Ponzi convince so many people? What was his strategy? And what eventually led to his downfall? Stay with us as we dive deeper into the rise and fall of Charles Ponzi. Ponzi's scheme set the stage for financial frauds that would shake the world for decades. But what happens when a Ponzi scheme grows too big to control? Fast forward nearly a century, and we find Bernie Madoff, one of Wall Street's most trusted names, at the center of the largest Ponzi scheme in history. Unlike Ponzi, Madoff didn't promise outrageous returns. Instead, he claimed to provide steady, consistent profits of 10 to 20%, just believable enough to avoid suspicion. Sound effect: the murmurs of a crowd, a news ticker beeping in the background. But how did he manage to fool thousands of investors, including major banks, hedge funds, and financial institutions, for decades? And when the 2008 financial crisis hit, why did everything collapse overnight? The truth behind Madoff's empire was darker than anyone imagined. Stay with us as we unravel the deception, the downfall, and the devastating impact of history's biggest financial fraud. December 2008. A desperate phone call, a confession that sent shockwaves through the financial world. Bernie Madoff, the man hailed as a Wall Street genius, admitted to running nothing more than a colossal lie. A $64.8 billion illusion shattered in an instant. But how did it all unravel? Not through an investigation, not through sharp-eyed regulators. It all came crashing down because the economy collapsed, and with it, the illusion Madoff had so carefully crafted. The moment new money stopped flowing in, his empire crumbled like a house of cards. Investors were left staring at account statements that meant nothing. Lives were ruined, charities wiped out, fortunes erased. But the biggest question remained: where did all the money go? Enter Irving Picard, the court-appointed trustee tasked with an impossible mission: recovering billions of vanished dollars. His investigation led to an unsettling discovery. Madoff's family, his sons, his brother, even his wife, had all benefited from the scheme. Lavish lifestyles, extravagant vacations, millions charged to the company. But did they know? Could they truly claim innocence? And what about the so-called net winners, investors who unknowingly profited from the scheme, withdrawing more than they originally put in? Should they be forced to return their gains to help those who lost everything? Would you be willing to give back money you thought was rightfully yours if it meant helping those who lost it all? And if you were one of Madoff's closest confidants, could you really claim you had no idea what was happening? As lawsuits mount and investigators dig deeper, the search for answers and justice continues. But one thing is certain: the fallout of Bernie Madoff's fraud isn't just about numbers. It's about trust, about the victims left in the wreckage, and about the sobering truth that sometimes the biggest criminals wear the finest suits. Harry Markopolos had always been a meticulous analyst, but nothing could have prepared him for the overwhelming realization he was about to confront. As he reviewed the financial statements and strategies, the deeper he dove into Bernie Madoff's operation, the more absurd it seemed. Madoff's returns, too consistent, too perfect, were too good to be true. The math simply didn't add up. Madoff's firm had to be dealing in a massive illusion. It was the hallmark of a Ponzi scheme, moving money around while the financial world looked on blindly. The numbers simply didn't make sense. The returns were too stable, the fluctuations of the market too volatile for someone to be untouched by the ups and downs. Harry knew something much darker was at play. Markopolos was not some casual observer. He had experience, expertise, and a thorough understanding of the financial world. His theory? A Ponzi scheme of the grandest scale imaginable. But how could Madoff, one of the most respected figures on Wall Street, be running such an operation? How could the SEC not see it? Despite all the evidence Harry compiled, the SEC brushed him aside. His warnings fell on deaf ears. Madoff continued to build his empire on fresh money, using new investors' funds to pay off older ones. It was a brilliantly crafted illusion, but it was an illusion nonetheless. While Wall Street continued to bask in its blind trust of Madoff, the rest of the world remained oblivious to the looming disaster. As the global economy spiraled downward in 2008, Madoff's empire was no longer able to prop itself up. Investors, frantic to get their money back, flooded his offices with requests. Madoff, whose web of lies had once seemed unbreakable, now found himself desperately scrambling for cash. But there was nothing left. The entire operation was a mirage. The consequences of Madoff's actions were about to crash into him with brutal force. Investors were furious, bankruptcies were triggered, and the world watched in horror as the truth finally came to light. $65 billion vanished. Gone. The life savings of countless families, institutions, and billionaires wiped away in the blink of an eye. But perhaps even more damning was the revelation that Harry Markopolos, armed only with suspicion and the courage to speak up, had been right all along. The aftermath was devastating. The SEC's failure to act, Madoff's personal betrayal, and the ripple effects of his scheme devastated thousands. But the most haunting question remained: where did all the money go? Irving Picard, the trustee, uncovered a disturbing truth. Madoff's family, his sons, his brother, his wife, had all profited from the scheme. Lavish vacations, expensive purchases, and millions of dollars funneled into their lives. But did they know? Could they claim ignorance? What about the so-called net winners? Those investors who, unknowingly, withdrew more than they initially invested. Should they be forced to return their profits to help those who lost it all? Would you? Could you? In the end, Bernie Madoff's name became synonymous with betrayal, not just of his clients, but of the entire financial system. His empire of lies crumbled, and with it, his family. The lives of those he destroyed will never be the same. But even as Madoff rots in a North Carolina prison, his legacy remains, a grim reminder of the dangers of unchecked greed. The story of Bernie Madoff is not just a cautionary tale of hubris and ambition. It is a warning to all of us. The damage he caused was not just financial, it was deeply personal. And as we close, we are left with one final question. Can anyone truly escape the shadow of a man like Bernie Madoff? Or are we all just one bad decision away from losing it all?